Thank you, Sven. 6. Herself. This time, the arrival would have been even harder to miss. As we heard loud voices from outside and saw a huge crowd through the glass, Lisa yelled, "It's Bretta!" and rushed towards the door. It was her. One could judge by the number of ecstatic locals gathered around the tallest woman they had ever seen, towering above them like a pine sticks out of bushes. Watching the scene from a side, I doubted that the majority of them could reach her breasts even with their arms fully stretched up. They didn't try to do precisely that, but came pretty close. They didn't hesitate to put their hands on top of each other's heads in order to level them with Ms. Sorensen's waist. They jumped to compare heights whilst in mid-air, and even in that position, her chest was higher than their heads. They clung to her immeasurable legs, and those legs looked particularly long in comparison with their bodies. And they shouted non-stop. Because of that bizarre-like chaos, Bretta was too busy smiling and shaking hands with strangers, so she didn't really have time to properly greet her best friend. She just bent down and gave Lisa a brief hug. This innocent move, however, made the crowd go absolutely mad. Now they had not one, but two very tall young ladies at their disposal. Well, kind of, since the girls don't belong to them, I thought with quiet satisfaction and some sense of superiority, as if they were mine, hey. The hotel staff performed slightly better this time, and 3 minutes later only Bretta and Lisa were standing at the receptionist's desk, accompanied by the same short manager, who was now looking like a real dwarf, with his head not higher than the Swede's hip, and incredibly happy. I stood up in the hope that they'd come over after checking in, and, in the meantime, enjoyed the view of Lisa's beautiful bum positioned unbelievably low next to her friend's, which wasn't that bad either, to put it mildly. I knew Lisa's one was on the same level as my belly, yet it was located somewhere in the middle of Bretta's thighs. And, as if to add insult to injury, she was in sneakers, while Lisa still sported her 2-inch high heels. My great expectations weren't met, unfortunately. Having finished with the formalities, the girls headed straight to the lifts. What could I do? Well, I thought, given Lisa's sexual habits, they don't need me, do they? And it seemed unlikely that they'd be back anytime soon. I sighed and got myself a drink, but even my favorite gin and tonic tasted bitter this time. I had just finished the glass and was contemplating having another one when a lift bell rang, and out they came, Lisa with a broad smile and then, bending significantly at the doors, Bretta. Evidently, she had enough time to take a shower and change her outfit. Her blue eyes were shining with happiness, her blonde hair splendidly fell down along her round shoulders, fully visible because of the sleeveless pink top she was wearing, which also revealed a wonderfully flat stomach above a wide, white belt and slim, blue jeans, which were long enough to cover her knees yet short enough to reveal her ankles. Further down were brown boots with 3 or 4 inches of heels. And this tower of a young, fresh beauty was moving in my direction, led by another tower who was now looking rather short in comparison, but I knew she wasn't short by any stretch of the imagination. The sight was simply fantastic, it was the dream come true. As the girls approached, I stood up to greet them. Unimaginable. Incredible. I couldn't believe my eyes, those very eyes that were at the level of Bretta's exposed belly button. Of course, I knew already she was tall, I knew she was amazingly tall, I had seen her with others, but this was the first time I met her in person, and this time, it was different. Completely different. Thrilling. Embarrassing. Exciting. And I don't know what else. Brett, this is Nick I told you about. He's a nice guy and, unlike our so-called male colleagues, he appreciates women. Tall ones, especially. Lisa winked at me, making me feel somewhat uneasy. Nick, meet Bretta, my best friend. Remember, I told you that you would instantly fall in love with her? Now you see why? Is she tall enough to meet your criteria? Definitely, she was. More than enough. I took the hand she kindly extended to me and stared for a second or two at those extraordinarily long fingers of hers. Then I craned my neck to look up, almost vertically up, and said, "Hello Bretta, nice to meet you." I was just about to add "finally," but managed to stop in time, otherwise, I'm afraid, it would sound silly. "Hi, I'm glad too." The same charming accent, yet this time it came not from the TV screen, but from above. She stood there, right in front of me, smiling down with her sensual, coral lips, sparkling blue eyes, and shiny strawberry hair. I know this sounds insane, her smiling hair, but hey, I don't give a damn. My neck started to ache, but I was ready to keep the position forever, even if my head would have fallen off completely. I have already lost my head, I comforted myself with a smile, so there's nothing else to lose. "You better ignore Lisa's remarks," I heard the angelic voice. "She's always into fun and sometimes appears to be rude, but she's very soft inside." "I know what Lisa is like inside, thank you very much. And I'd really love to have a chance to check what you are when it comes to that. But right now, at this very moment, I'm wondering whether I will be able to move my neck downwards anytime soon." And, as though hearing my thoughts, Lisa grabbed the initiative. "Brett, I'm afraid our gentleman can't hold this position for much longer. Nick, how about calling your Japanese friend and asking her to show us around?" "Sorry, guys, I don't think I'm with you," the angelic voice turned apologetic. "It's pretty hard to walk around after 15 long hours of a flight." "Oh, sure, I forgot they never provide enough legroom for you," giggled Lisa. To be honest, I can't blame them, and she playfully stroked Bretta's thigh. I finally got out of my stupor. "Shall we then just go to the roof bar instead, so I can get us a couple of drinks?" "Oh, thank you, this sounds much better." Bretta's eye shone down to me. I was bathing in those rays of blue. "But I don't want to ruin your plans." As though I could possibly have any plans to leave her alone. "It's absolutely fine," I assured her, and Lisa smirked at me knowingly. "We'll be happy to keep you company." "We will indeed," Lisa confirmed. "Thank you," then. Bretta didn't insist on having a rest on her own, so I thought she really wanted to spend time with us, and this hope made me happy. "But you don't need to pay," Bretta added. "Of course he doesn't," laughed her friend. "He's not going to pay a penny anyway. It's on Mayfair." I would have thought that the bartenders and regulars had gotten used to my entries with very tall and jaw-droppingly beautiful women, but this time I seemed to have managed to beat even my own previous records. As the three of us came into the bar on the 41st floor, the atmosphere solidified with stunned looks. All customers abandoned their drinks and meals, and two Japanese guys immediately stood up and moved towards us, as if they'd waited for our appearance for a couple of hours or so. One of them was pretty tall for a local, only an inch or two shorter than my 5'6'7". His companion, though, didn't even come up to his mouth. "Excuse me, I don't mean to offend you in any way," said the taller one in good American English, "but my brother is keen to know how tall you are." He was looking at Bretta, obviously. And I cannot deny, I'm intrigued, too. She looked down at him. In fact, she looked down every time she needed to talk to anybody, and simply said, "I'm 242 centimeters. And I'm in heels, if this is important for your brother. They are 7 centimeters high." The taller guy turned to his brother and translated. As he proceeded, the shorty's eyebrows rose, his eyes rounded. Suddenly, he took a deep bow and began to talk really fast. His speech was very emotional. I even thought he was about to start crying, but didn't understand a word he was saying. "I bet he's asking Bretta to pose for a picture," whispered Lisa into my ear. "I apologize on my brother's behalf. He's only 18, but he is dying to ask you about a photograph. As the taller guy translated this, the Russian girl peeked at me victoriously. It would only take a few seconds of your precious time, madam. Bretta didn't look offended at all. Evidently, this wasn't a request she hadn't heard before. Of course, she nodded. No worries. She was an angel. And right at that very moment, no translation involved, a camera appeared in the little guy's hands. Can there be an event on Earth capable of catching a Japanese person without a camera at hand? I wondered. He quickly passed it to his big brother and looked way up at Bretta with a silent question written on his face. Tell him to come closer, she pointed at the floor next to her, and instantly the 18-year-old toddler relocated himself over there. Lisa and I took 2 steps away to let him enjoy the moment. To tell the truth, staring at that couple, I felt some sort of envy or jealousy, perhaps. Bretta looked terrific, with her shy smile and shiny eyes, her long neck and pale shoulders smoothly curving into firm, round breasts, relatively small on her towering frame, yet undoubtedly large enough to make Pamela Anderson look like an underdeveloped child. The thinness of her violin-like waistline was emphasized by her state-of-the-art, broad hips without a hint of fat. And her magnificent legs, well, they deserved a whole chapter, but would I be able to find the words I need to even start to describe them? Only now did I fully realize that she hadn't exaggerated a thing at that memorable TV show. Watching the scene, I could actually imagine a short guy standing under those legs. Even with relatively low heels on Bretta's feet, the Japanese guy was up to her crotch, his right hand resting on her left hip, and to put it there, he had to stretch himself quite a bit. He looked ecstatic, smiling happily, yet a little lost. What I also realized at that moment is why I was feeling envious a second ago. He was considerably shorter than me, and could proudly stand by legs whose point of convergence was as high as the top of his head. Bretta's hand lay on the side of his head, right on his ear. Everything seemed to be ready, but all of a sudden, the small guy said something in Japanese. He supposes it's unfair, translated the taller one to Bretta. You are stooping. Well, I am a little, she replied. Was there a limit to her patience? That's the only way I can sort of hug your brother. This doesn't matter, instructed the interpreter, and she straightened up her spine. Now, with her fingertips just touching the top of the guy's head, his brother finally pushed the bloody button. Be warned, this picture is for your private eyes only, declared Lisa when the 2 fellows thanked us in the politest way imaginable. Not for the media, including the web. What's wrong with publicity? I asked Bretta, as the 2 of us proceeded to the table, and Lisa headed for the restroom. Fortunately, it was an early afternoon, the music was down, so I was able to keep the conversation going without shouting, simply by talking upwards. My mouth was below her belly button. You know, it is that sort of publicity that I don't really need, she paused, looking vertically down in order to catch my eyes. The other day, a friend of mine sent me a link to a website where only tall women were pictured. And there was an amateur picture of me. We spotted a table at the edge of the rooftop terrace. A glass barrier separated us from the abyss pierced by brightly lit skyscrapers. We came up to the barrier, it was up to my chest and much too low for Bretta to feel safe, so I offered her my hand, which she kindly and gracefully accepted, and gestured at one of the 4 low armchairs encircling the table. She lowered down, with her knees almost up to her face, and gave me a guilty smile. I'm sorry, Nick, I can't hide them. You don't need to be sorry, Bretta, it is not something to be ashamed of, they are magnificent. Oh, thank you, you're too much of a gentleman. She moved slightly left and right and looked rather cozy now. A lady like you only deserves the best, I responded, and she laughed happily. Of course, Nick, of course. A lady like me. Not knowing whether this was her genuine reaction to my rather awkward compliment, or something utterly different, I decided to come back to this later, and for now stick with the matter she was talking about a minute ago. So, what was with that website you've just mentioned? Ah, right. So, this website. Full of stuff about tall women. Which is okay, I suppose. There's nothing wrong in liking tall women. It was cool to hear those words from her, the tallest of the tall. Or short women, for that matter, or skinny women, or, I don't know, fat men. What I didn't really like is that those people called me and others giantesses and discussed some really weird things, like my weight and whether I'm able to lift a man single-handedly. This is already quite disrespectful, I think, but someone went even further. They photoshopped my body nearly twice in length, as if I weren't tall enough. Can you imagine that? Again, Bretta smiled at me, but this was not the happiest of her smiles. Aren't I tall enough, Nick? Wow, this was quite a punch. What shall I say to that? I think you are tall just enough to make a man happy. You think so? The smile cleared her face. My experience is different, unfortunately. Men seem to be scared by my tallness. Do they? She nodded. But you wear high heels, so you're not really upset with the men's alleged fears. You call these 7.5 centimeters high? She laughed again, this time genuinely. Making me feel happier as well. Wait till you see me in 20 then. I certainly hope I will, I thought to myself, but let's see if I can pull this any longer. 20? 20 centimeters. It's like that. She stretched her fingers a little apart, demonstrating the length she was talking about. Is it like 8 inches? I said. I think so, she said. It must be a sight to remember. I can't even imagine how tall you look in them. Maybe you'll show it to me one day? I smiled and got to my feet, ready to ask Bretta what she'd like to drink, but she must have misunderstood my move. Immediately, she stood up too, and rose on her tiptoes. I guess it's like this, she smiled at me from her newly obtained height. I was looking up in awe, fearing that my angel would disappear into the darkening skies. Am I tall enough now, Nick? She repeated the question, then giggled, and sat back down. It was like a mirage. I shook my head, and finally asked Bretta what I could get her from the bar. Oh, thank you, Nick. She touched my hand in a fleeting gesture. So you don't want to answer my question? I didn't know what to say. I don't know. I think you're tall enough, Bretta. Your eyes seem to be saying more than enough, she chuckled. Did they? I didn't say that, Bretta. You didn't, Nick, you're right. She looked at me directly. Our position allowed her to do so without a bend. A white Russian then, please. Not your average choice, Bretta. There's little average about me, haven't you noticed, Nick? Her question, as well as her tone, sounded playful, and I was enjoying every second of our interaction. It's been my favorite cocktail since I met Lisa. She's Russian, you know. The next chapter is Six the Artist and the Cowboy again.